All right. Welcome, everyone, to the ninth episode of the AdvisorTech Book Podcast. Today, I have Mark Gilbert on from Zocks. This should be a fun one. I think I've been publicly critical of the AI note takers, so this will be a really fun conversation. Welcome, Mark.
Awesome. It's great to be here. I appreciate it, Joe.
Yeah. I like to start out just asking about a book you're reading currently. This is the AdvisorTech Book Podcast, so I like to combine books and tech at the beginning of every conversation.
Yeah, I will literally just pull up when I say reading, like in full disclosure, it's Audible, but I'm listening to books as
That's
I do
fine.
more now than read. Book I'm on right now is actually a book called Scaling Innovation. It's the second one in a series by a number of pricing people in technology. I think the first one is called Monetizing Innovation or something like that. But it's super interesting because obviously, in our space, we're focused heavily on AI and just how that's changing things. And one of the things that we're seeing is, I think this will be true for everyone, like kind of the way you buy software and the way you buy technology is probably going to change with AI. Um, so it's just kind of talking through that and different things that different people have done and kind of how people prefer to buy and stuff like that. So I find it super interesting. Some of your listeners may find it pretty dry, frankly, but if you want a little under the hood, I think on kind of tech and where it's going and things like that, it's a really well written book.
Yeah. So, I mean, traditionally, software has been like per month, per user kind of pricing. What's his take on, or what's the take on the future of pricing for software?
Yeah, so and I think you'll start to even see this with us over time, right? I'll just say, like, I'm not a huge fan of the per user, per year, per month thing. I think
Yeah.
for a bunch of reasons. I think it's worked well over time, but for a lot of different software, it doesn't make sense. In this industry, we also see a lot of people doing like a percentage of assets under management or something like that, right? Just because that grows. I think um, the more we can, frankly, charge as we deliver real value, the better. And so we've done a number of things for that already. But with this specifically, the kind of fast forward through is like a lot of these systems are going to basically be charging for like when you want it to do work, right? So like if you wanted to
Okay.
open an account, if you wanted to apply for a policy, create a plan, those types of things like that, and a lot of it, for those not in tech, I guess, just like as we move to the cloud, a lot of the cloud infrastructure providers like an Amazon or Microsoft Azure, they actually charge in almost these like little pieces, right? So you can
Mm.
charge per gig, like you no longer have to go buy a drive, right? You can just buy a gigabyte of storage or whatever in pieces.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be, I think, more and more like that is kind of what it's getting towards. So should be interesting for people. And I think ideally, like one of the things that's hard for us is like, if you're growing your business, we obviously want to be helpful in that, like the fact that you're getting charged the same as someone who may be using the system like quite a lot, right, in different ways is interesting. And I think ideally everyone would like, or at least we would like it, and most people would like it to be, the value it's delivering to you, where you're kind of happy to pay it because it's doing something that you don't want to be doing.
Yeah. The way I've seen that is like with the email verification software, it's like Never Bounce or something. You can either pay a monthly amount and get like so many email credits per month, or you can just buy like a chunk of email credits and then like work them down and then buy another chunk. Um, it's kind of pay per usage as opposed to pay per month.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's kind of exactly it. I think that's
Cool.
exactly it.
What any new tech you've been trying out recently, whether business related or otherwise?
Yeah, as the answer, I guess I do a lot of new tech. I'm trying to think of things that are useful. I've just been using, obviously we spent a lot of time with the LLMs on kind of the AI pieces. I have been using, we do a lot of presentations and not anything I would say that I'm like using day to day yet, but there's a lot of software for like kind of presentation creation. I'll say, not a graphics artist is
Yeah,
the best way to put it.
right.
And so like I used to be using a lot of the image generators and things like that to kind of get like imagery and those types of things. I think what we're seeing now is a lot of the like beautifuls and things like that are just better at almost more like presentation, right? Where you have artifacts, you want to move them around, you want to change the way they work and things like that. So
Yeah,
I would say not new in the sense of like I've been trying them and using them for a bit, but good in the sense of they're getting better very quickly. And
yeah.
so like I would say they're kind of becoming load bearing for it. For me at least, I know a lot of our team a lot more quickly.
No, that's cool. No, I mainly just use Canva and like I'll pay a designer like set up a template for me, and then I'll just like drop images into the template and adjust the wording for each podcast or something like that.
Yeah, if you have a good designer, that works really well. I think the challenge for a lot of people is just finding one, right, that's easy to work with
Sure.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah, it's
true.
impressive. It's interesting to see what will come out there. Um, yeah, it's super interesting just to see it move so quickly too.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive into the meat of the
Cool.
podcast. What's your background leading into starting Zocks? And then maybe why did you choose this category within like the advisor tech landscape?
Yeah, so my background, so I grew up more on the technical side. I've been building products kind of my whole career, like software products. Um, I spent quite a while, kind of right out of college and even in college at Microsoft, so building a lot of the enterprise platforms there. And kind of towards the end of that, Azure and launching Azure, and then a service on top of Azure. After that, I actually went to a company. It was a small company at the time called Hearsay Social, which a lot of
Okay.
wealth firms use. It sells
Yeah.
more into the enterprise, so a little less on the independent RIA side, and a little bit more on the large shops. But I actually built up the product team there. That was the first time I got very deep on vertical SaaS, and I think the thing that was really interesting to me is, at Microsoft, you're building all the stuff that a lot of people use, but it actually takes quite a lot to get usage out of it, like to get, value out of the system. And I
Mm.
think verticalizing and, like really focusing on financial services allows you to tailor the software just a lot more for the industry, right? And I would say, like, I don't think this is surprising to anybody. Financial services, mostly because of compliance and privacy and security, somewhat struggles to benefit from new software a lot, just because it has all these special needs, if you will. Like, it has, very obviously for good reasons, very high security requirements. There are compliance requirements, right, that come in, and so there's all of these different things that make it a lot harder, I think, for a lot of people in financial services to use the latest software. And so we did that for quite a while. I became the CTO there before leaving, and then I was at a company called Twilio, and ran on their worldwide communication network. So most people not in tech don't know Twilio. It's actually a fairly large public company. But anytime you talk with an Uber driver, every time you get a text message from Airbnb, that's all Twilio underneath. And so with that, we were handling a lot of the communications for some of the largest enterprises. And I think at that point, with the rise of AI, started to really see, hey, we can start to get really interesting structured data from these conversations, and and frankly, like, use that information to help financial advisors and help the firms that they're working on. So left in 2022 to start Zocks. And we ended up building for a little over a year to get all the compliance and privacy capabilities in place and the enterprise
Okay.
management capabilities. And then, like, did an early adopter program late 2023, ran that for about 6 months, and then launched Feb of last year. So it's been growing quite quickly since then, which is great. Uh, we think that what we're looking at right now, and this may be part of what we dive into a little bit,
Sure.
what we're looking at right now is very much V1 of what's going on, right? Like, I think a
Okay.
lot of people use something like Zocks to help them with, like, notes, right, in the way that
Right.
they normally would write notes and put them into a system. And there's a lot of different systems that do those things. Uh, we think that's an important piece because it's definitely saving a lot of time, but there's so much more that we can and kind of do already with this information that really, we think will help advisors scale a lot more.
Yeah. No, I think like in my second podcast, we are talking about the foundation of an advisor tech stack and just like communication, all communications with clients, whether it's emails or Zoom meetings or texting, phone, like any way that you communicate with a client, capturing that and then being able to develop or build a timeline of the relationship over time using that data is pretty important.
Yeah, like, it definitely, I think, we saw this as well with the move to the cloud and mobile. Like, once you start getting a lot more data in an area, there's just new scenarios and new ways that you can help clients that is really hard otherwise to do at scale.
Yeah. Well, it'd be fun to talk about the category as a whole just a little bit. I know
Yeah.
there's like 30 plus AI note takers for financial advisors now. I think you guys and Jump kind of like set yourselves apart pretty quickly as like the leaders in market share. Um, then Nevis just came out and raised an enormous amount of money
Yeah.
and
Yeah, a
their
couple
feature set doesn't look all that different than the other feature sets that I've looked at. What where do you think this why do you think maybe this use case for AI was so easy to take root? And then maybe where do you see it going?
Yeah, like, I guess to the first part of that question, um, it's just an area that, for every, I think, advisor we work with, they don't love doing it just straight out, right? They would much rather be spending time with clients, marketing, or frankly, just getting their time back.
Right,
Most of them won't admit this too openly, but like a lot of them also don't do it very as much as they would like, is maybe the right way to put it, right? So like
right,
we kind of joke that they're either burning all Thursday night or Friday doing this, or they're frankly just not able to do it.
right.
And so immediately it's just one of these areas where like everything gets better. And I think for them it saves them time and also just gives them peace of mind. There's a lot of great side effects to it. Like, we see advisors focusing on their clients a lot more in meetings because, the ones who are very good at capturing notes still like almost have to pause the conversation and then, like kind of catch up and then go back to it. And other ones,
Sure.
don't do that. So I think that's been a big piece. And then for us, like the way we've designed our system, it's just very easy to deploy, right? Like I think if you look at getting a lot of these other systems that are kind of like part of the core tech stack, if you will, for a financial advisor, it takes them a while. You got to figure out how to get them going. You got to start putting data in them. And like literally with Zocks, you can just click a button, right? And like 5 minutes later, a minute later, start to get value out of the system. So I think that's a lot of the reason it's taken off fairly quickly. And you're right, like we see just huge demand growth and everything else running quite quickly. And I think the speed at which we're seeing people buy is um is not common, I would just say, in financial services, right? Like,
Oh, not yeah, not at all.
not at all.
um,
Yeah, so that's I think like why the area is taken off. And sorry, I forgot
right.
the first part of the question or the other part.
No, it's all right. So I'd love to just briefly talk about advisors not taking notes. Like I've worked for maybe 10 different individual advisors over the past 7 years. At least three of them will like leave a client meeting and have no plan at all to do the
Yeah.
things that they said they were going to do in the meeting. Um, to the point where like a review meeting comes up a year later and they look back and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, your account's still sitting in cash. We were meant to invest that. And it's like, it's a compliance problem. It's a client satisfaction problem. But like the excuses they come up with, like why they never did the things they said they were going to do, is interesting.
Yeah, we see I thankfully I don't see that much,
Yeah.
which is helpful. We do see I think a lot of them frankly have very good intent. Like they'll come out of the meeting and be like, "Oh, it's great to chat with Joe. I'm going to get these things done." And then
Right.
invariably whatever they get a call from home and have to run home, they hop into another meeting, whatever it is. And then they either forget that they need to do it or, maybe there's 5 items they were going to do and they remembered two of them.
Right.
Or very often just time goes on. Right. And then, as you know, like, if you and I got done this podcast and we both had to write down notes, doing it right after is probably the easiest thing.
For
Doing
sure.
it, like the next day is a little harder. Doing it 5 days later, it starts to get much, much trickier.
Yeah.
And so we see a lot of that. And I think also, like there's a lot of really interesting information that comes out of client discussions that is extremely rich. The advisors, when they hear it, know it's valuable, right? Like if you tell me, or like, let's say I tell you something about my family or my kids or whatever else, you kind of know, you're like, oh, I'd love that nugget, right? I'd like to keep it. But you're
Right.
like, where do I put it? And and that's where I think we see, the ability to capture all of these things are very valuable. This is kind of where I was describing of like putting a note in the CRM system is useful, but also probably not the best way to remember all of that. Like at some point in the future, you're going to want to go in and say like, oh, I really need to remember about Mark's kids. And you're not going to want to read through 20 notes in the CRM system. You're just going to want to like see all the details, right, about whatever I've said. Or
Yeah.
even more realistically, you're actually going to want to look across your entire book of business and say like, tell me everyone who has kids who play hockey, right, or something like that, like whatever it is, right. And that, as you get more of this data and as you get it kind of more structured, right, there's all of these really cool things that you can do that just makes it easier to kind of run the business.
I think it helps with the handoff. Like many times, the advisor's not actually the one doing the action items after the meeting. Like typically, it's their assistant or associate or CSA or something. Um, and if those action items are captured and entered into the CRM, then that person can take those things and run with them, and the advisor doesn't really need to worry about it. Which is, I think that is a super positive thing for the
Yeah,
note taking.
I would say our most common scenario, because we get a lot of questions around, like, frankly, is it younger advisors who are using it more or older and stuff? And the reality is, like, we see it evenly across the range. The most common scenario for us is someone with a team of like maybe one, two, or three people that are highly trusted. And a lot of the problem is that that advisor, if you will, is like they're the ones who have the real restrictions on their time. Like they'll go from meeting
Sure.
one to client two to client three. The rest of the team is trying to be helpful, and
Right.
they almost need to pin the person down to extract the data, and so right away, they can start to move, right, and start to say, "Hey, it looks like with Joe, you talked about these 3 things, like, we have them queued up, just let us know if we can go," whatever that is, right? Like, it kind of unlocks and scales everyone a lot more quickly without having to basically be bottlenecked on, often the advisor, right? That's often the person who a lot of people are sitting on to get the data out. And then again, like, if it's first meeting of the day and they have like 3 clients back to back, right? That gets tricky by even lunch to get all the data from them.
For sure. Yeah. No, and advisors have, I mean, one advisor I worked for had 40,000 emails in their inbox. Another one had 17,000. Like, just
Yeah.
they're blasted with so much spam and junk and stuff. I'm wondering, potentially a side effect of AI is like typically an associate advisor, paraplanner, like someone would sit in all these meetings and like help take the notes, and kind of that would be their learning experience,
Yeah.
whether they eventually took over the client relationship, or just eventually became an advisor themselves. So I'm wondering, are you seeing that kind of training still going on in meetings, or is it, or
Yeah.
how's the next generation going to get trained, I guess?
We do, so I would agree with that, right? I think one of the realities in a lot of industries and definitely financial services is like a lot of the training goes on with, it's both like, hey, I have a lot of administrative work to do, so I will get an associate to do that, and it helps
Right.
me. And frankly, by them going through all that activity, like they learn, right? They're kind of forced to learn.
Right.
Um, what we're seeing now is similarly, people will still pull people into meetings regularly just to hear. I think the positives of it are they are actually able to learn and kind of participate a bit more. So, like if something needs to be done middle of the meeting, like, hey, let's whatever, get you an insurance policy or something like that, the associate can actually start doing that right away on the fly. The other thing that we've done, which is just an interesting use case, is we do have like what we call scorecarding, pretty rich scorecarding. And what it allows the advisors to do is to get the associates in the meetings on their own a little earlier, right? So I think
Mhm.
very often, if you talk with advisors, they will literally have like an associate sit through the majority of their meetings for like 3 or 6 months,
Yeah.
right, before they're really doing anything. And now they can, kind of more 2 to 3 months, start to handle some of the meetings that are maybe a little bit more like, hey, we just need to get some things done, right? Like it's not really an advisory meeting as much as just making sure these things. They can, and then because they have some visibility into how that meeting went, they're a little bit more comfortable doing that without them there. And so, and then the system also actually gives the associate kind of tips on like, hey, like this is the question you asked that got the client speaking the most, whatever you were supposed to ask for these 3 things and you didn't, whatever it is, right? Like just those
Right.
types of things on. And so it can be a really good, almost like a learning aid, if you will, or tool in that. And it does start to, I would say, quantify and put some data behind some things that have been very, not that way. I think what we see with a lot of advisors is, they obviously need to grow their teams to get to the scale they want and just to get the time and serve the clients they need, but they're almost inherently not, you know, managers slash hirers
Yeah.
slash, they just kind of want to work and have someone go with them. And
Right.
so it does help them with a lot of that. It gives the advisor a bit more structure and kind of ability to like get the associate in and go. We
Yeah.
do still see the associates sitting through quite a lot of meetings, though. It's just more that they can start to take action versus just like heads down writing everything.
Sure. No, that's nice. The second thing you mentioned was that AI note takers are easy to deploy, which also means they're easy to switch. So I'm wondering, how are you thinking about building a moat around Zocks so that Zocks becomes harder to switch from, I guess?
Yeah, we don't really spend any time on making the technology hard to switch off, in the sense of
Okay.
like, our view is that if the client is getting a lot of value, then they'll stay on, and if not,
Sure.
not. I think we see it fair amount of technology in the space that's frankly the advisors don't love it, but they're stuck for lack of a better phrase.
Right.
There are things though that we are like so our view is like the more we can do for the advisor, the better. And so what we do is we really try to do as much as we can for them beyond just meeting notes as well. Right. So
Right.
like when we even at the start of this year, like we had like meeting notes, there's all this like, well, what we call structured data. We launched the ability to draft reply to client emails. So if a client emails them, this honestly just came out of like talking with advisors. They're like, I'm burning an hour or two a day to just replying to client emails.
Right.
And so because we're connecting in with these systems, we can draft replies to those. And then the other huge one is really kind of filling out forms and things like that for them, right? So like if you need to open an account, we launched account opening with a few of the broker dealers already. The other large custodians are coming on shortly. All of those pieces are kind of going, I would say, quite well. And our view is like, if it's hard for them to provide the same client service at the same amount of time without us, then they won't really switch off us.
Yeah.
Um, that obviously, means that we have to continue to deliver more and more value to them. But I think from what we're seeing, both in just like how much administrative work is in a lot of these practices today, as well as what we think we can do with AI. Like we think there's a huge amount of runway there for it.
How far have y'all gone with data gathering, scheduling meetings, and the other related tasks around like meeting prep and stuff?
Yeah, so we've done. We have, I think, the deepest, like, kind of richest meeting prep. We can go across a whole bunch of systems. So with Zocks, like, if you connect to eMoney, if you connect Orion, if you connect, a Salesforce or pick your CRM, email, we will actually go across all of those data sources to be able to prep for a meeting. So some people want like, here's exactly their holdings and what we've done recently. Other people want mostly personal information. Other people want to know when did they last get a hold of us and what were we talking about. All of
Sure.
that is very highly, kind of configurable in the system. We're quite deep there. And then so that's a big piece. And then in addition to that, as I mentioned, we've started, so we have what we call forms internally. And what
Okay.
that really is the ability to structure data, not just from the conversations, but from these other systems as well. So if somebody
Right.
is like, hey, you just whatever bought a house maybe and you have no insurance, like let's get you some term life insurance because you have a family. Like we can go through and say, hey, there's 25 data points we need. Here are the 23 that we know from these different systems, and do that. And that's very sticky just because it's like, they spend a huge amount of time going to these different systems, pulling in and being like, where's the most recent data on Joe? Right? Like where's his home address? What home address is most recent? Is that sitting in Orion? Is it sitting in Schwab? Where is it? Right? All of those things. And
Right.
then, the ability to open accounts and move money and change beneficiaries is a pretty big deal for a lot of people as well. And that's like we support that already and are just expanding it very quickly with different, kind of broker dealers and custodians. So yeah,
Yeah.
quite a lot there.
Um, so as you're collecting data from all these different systems and you are structuring it, like I know I've written a lot about, AI note takers and CRMs, like
Yeah.
to the point where some companies have basically said we can suck all the data out of a CRM. It's not really even necessary anymore. And then we can either just manage it in the platform or we can move it to a different platform. Um, so
Yeah.
I started calling them CRM killers. um, but are you and maybe some companies are just scared to call themselves CRMs because they don't want to go head to head with CRM. And I think advisors want to switch CRMs like they want a tooth extraction. Like they just
Yeah.
it sounds
That's
very
probably true.
painful.
Probably true. Yeah, we don't like so we don't the vast majority of our users have a CRM, right?
Right.
They're attached to that CRM. I think with all of these systems, the real question is like, what are you using it for, right? And
Right.
so, as an example, like 20 years ago, most people didn't have a CRM, right? Like they really didn't. Like eMoney or whatever they were using, and frankly, even before eMoney, right? They had spreadsheets, and so it's really kind of like what's the system doing and what's it providing value for. I think we see CRMs used for a whole bunch of different reasons, right? So if it truly is an integration hub for you, if it's your books and records, if you're running something like a Salesforce or Dynamics and it's really where you go to like query all your stuff and get all the data and do all the integrations, like we don't do any of that, like that stuff really. Our goal is really like, we kind of view it as like CRMs give you a record and are really a system of record. We really view ourselves as more of a system of work. Like we're going to do the work for you and a system of insights. Some people, like I would say anybody who's probably not using their CRM anymore, to your point, I'll just get my data and I don't care, probably
Yeah,
wasn't using their CRM very aggressively before, frankly, right?
sure.
Like it's probably basic,
Right.
contact information and that's it. And I would say like if you're doing that, like spreadsheets also work. There's a lot of things you can do. So I do think a lot of it is just like what people are using different systems for and what's there. And I think as we approach any of these things, what we try to do is have people get more value out of their current systems. So like if you are using a planning system, right, like a Right Capital or eMoney or something, those are great systems, right? Typically, what we hear is the biggest pain point is just the friction of data entry, right? Like you can spend hours filling out e-money,
Yeah, for sure.
like hours. And so, if we can click and do that in like a few minutes, right, or frankly
Right.
even seconds, and have you scan it and do it, like e-money becomes more valuable for you. You're going to use it more. You're getting more out of that, license and everything you're paying, and you're also saving time doing it. So that's typically our approach to pretty much every system we work with, right? Like we put more data in the CRM, we put it in consistently, so it should be more valuable to you. But if you're
Yeah.
ultimately not using your CRM, then you're not using it. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how we see it. But it's not. I think one of the interesting things for us with AI is like there's just so many things that we can do for the advisors that we really don't spend any time thinking through like, should we go and get these other systems, you know what I mean? Like try to do something where they don't need those. Like we get those requests, as you'd imagine, from a few different people who I think just don't want to, basically spend money on a CRM, frankly. But I would say if you're getting use out of it, you get use out of it. And there's a lot. There's a lot we think that we can do for the advisor and their team. That's probably a lot more valuable than trying to recreate, a lot of features that exist in CRMs today.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So we do have a question from Ryan. He said Zocks Forms doesn't let us map to specific contact fields in Wealthbox. Any chance this will be updated in the future?
Oh yeah. So two things there. One is with Wealthbox, you can actually click on the Wealthbox icon right beside the name, and we will actually go through all of the fields and let you know if we think any should be updated and then update them for you. So that may be
Okay.
an alternative to using forms. But then, yes, two big things that are coming out with forms very quickly. One is the ability to map into specific like fields and objects as well, and so you can just click and push through. And then the other one that we've had a lot of requests on is actually just publishing right to the PDF. So you can export it as a PDF today, but essentially filling out PDFs, if that makes sense. So like if you have
Nice.
a long, as I'm sure everyone knows, right? Like long, whatever form for doing ABC with a custodian or something like that, and we don't support the full automation of that. You'll be able to just click, and it'll take the form data and fill out the PDF, and then you can send it off for DocuSign or whatever you want.
Okay. Said thanks. I had more info in my original question, but ran into school character limit. Cool. Um, no, that's neat. So do you see the CRMs launching their own AI note takers as a threat, or do you just think because you have first mover advantage, you can innovate faster, and so your AI note taker will always be better than whatever the CRMs have?
Um, I would say it's more of the latter, but I think our approach is also fairly different. So we have launched earlier. These things are pretty tricky to get right, frankly, right? So,
Sure.
like, I think if it's 2 people on a Zoom meeting, it's not the hardest thing on the planet.
Right.
What and a lot of people, like, if that's kind of the what the advisor does, like, that works well. We've done a lot around, like, you know, 4 people in the client meeting, like 4 client people, right? Like 2 generations, maybe a financial advisor and a paraplanner, maybe a tax planner or state attorney, and, like, does all the data go to the right people? We just haven't seen any of the CRM note takers be able to do anything close to that, and I think a lot of that is time and just the amount of effort they have, that they're able to put in. I think the other big thing for us is our view of the world is that most advisors have a lot of different systems they need to work with to really be successful, right? So, like, obviously, Office is a big one, the CRM is a big one, the planning system is a big one, often the portfolio management, and then ultimately the custodians. And so, as we look at it, like, we're kind of an overlay that works across all of these things, and we'll move data between them. I think normally when we look at the CRMs, what we see them doing, or any of these kind of like what I would call add-on note takers, is they often view themselves as the master data source. And the reality is, like, it almost never is, right? Like, the CRM is
Yeah.
often the data source for the contact info, but not your holdings. That's really sitting in the custody system, right? And all of these
Right.
things. And so that's really why I think a lot of people lean more towards using, Zocks, because they can start to drive these things like filling out the other systems and doing all of those types of things as well. And it's, like, I know everyone always kind of thinks through like how are these going to work and play out. The reality is like all of like a CRM takes a lot of software engineers to build properly.
Yeah.
An AI system like ours takes a lot of software engineers to build it properly. And so it's actually fairly hard to do both well, I think, from
Sure.
what we've seen.
I can attest to the fact that CRMs are not well maintained. And so the custodian data, the AI note takers data is typically going to be better than whatever data is in the CRM, unless advisors are actively like managing and cleaning up their CRMs. I
Yeah.
did a bunch of like CRM assessments basically where I exported everything and then did a bunch of pivot tables. And yeah, it was total chaos. And like clients aren't identified as clients and prospects aren't properly identified. And there's like thousands of leads that never were anything that are just sitting there. Um, so that makes sense to me. Do you think do you think it will just continue to be a race between the AI note takers and the CRMs that are trying to have their own note takers, or do you think there will be like a divergence eventually where the AI note takers will have enough data they don't even need the CRM anymore?
I don't, again, like, as you said, there's quite a lot of AI note takers now. You probably know more than I do. um, and I would say each one, like, my guess is not all of us are going to run the same strategy, right? Like some
Right.
people will probably start, and I think you've seen this with CRMs, right? Like if you go look at like Advisor Engine, we were just talking about them last week. Like that's a great product, right? And part of the reason it's great is like they now have like a TAM, like they've put all these pieces together that make it really, really valuable. That's a
Right.
very different strategy from like kind of a red tail, which obviously is an Orion, like that strategy in Wealthbox standalone. So I think you're just going to see different people do different things. I
Sure.
My guess is most of the CRM systems that do this will kind of get it to a like this is helpful and kind of good enough for now and probably sit it there. That would be my
Okay.
guess. And I think we've seen them do that with other things, right? Where it's like there's a calendar in the CRM, yet most people use Outlook, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people have like kind of planning baked into their systems, and the reality is most people use a dedicated planning system because they're just deeper. And so I think you'll see that. Same with like
That's a pretty
risk
interesting
allows and
take.
stuff.
Yeah, like
Yeah, we'll see. We'll
hardly
see.
anybody uses the email features in Wealthbox or in Advise Um, barely use the calendar. Most people use their Outlook calendar. Um, that is interesting.
Yeah, and I think with that, like how would I describe that? With that, I think people often start with like, "Hey, I just need this and this. If you could just do these things, I don't need it." But you look like I know how many engineers work on Outlook at Microsoft. Like it's not a small number, right? Like it is big, and there's a lot of stuff in Outlook that none of us will ever use, to be super
Right.
clear. But it's challenging. And then I think what we see is as these new generations of technology come out, whether that's mobile, whatever it is, you'll see it becomes apparent when someone isn't investing deeply or it's not the main thing they do because it'll take them forever to get like a really good mobile experience. It will take
Sure.
whatever that those types of things, right? And so I just think of I'm just thinking like it's a very especially in this space where a lot of the providers are focused on financial services, it's not like they have engineering teams of 100 people, right? So it's pretty hard to keep all of a CRM, like the core parts of a CRM, plus a calendar, plus an email, plus a planning system, all going. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No. And like as an example, this will be interesting to talk about. I don't think Wealthbox has ever launched native automations, basically where um, certain actions trigger other actions within the CRM. They've always kind of relied on Zapier to be like, if you want to do this, you're going to have to hook up Zapier. Um, and Slant, which literally I don't think they've been building longer than this year, like launched a far better automations feature than Wealthbox simply because well, Wealthbox doesn't have an automations feature.
Yeah.
So it's like, how is a startup able to create world's better features than a company that's been around for years and years? Like that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, I think if someone cares deeply about something and focuses on it, they'll frankly be able to build a better whatever it is. I think the real question is like, do enough people care and want that,
You
right?
should turn that into a book. That's a pretty good idea.
It's true though, like that, and even as you're starting a company, right? That's a lot
Right.
of what you're doing is you're really trying to figure out like, first of all, where is there a big opportunity to help people? And like for us, when we first started talking with advisors like that, there was clearly value there. What we didn't know right away is just how broad that pain point was, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the difference between like, smaller companies and bigger companies and everything else.
That's interesting. Like, are the people building the feature passionate about the feature? I think oftentimes when you see a company get bought by a bigger company, the passion dies and it just becomes about, how can we keep this thing making money or growing slowly or try to cross sell our feature sets.
Uh,
But when the passion is gone, they stop innovating, which
yeah.
is like it's a human problem. It's also like a corporate problem. Like,
Yeah, it really depends on I think what the goal I think there's 2 things, right? Like, one, what is the goal of the company, right? And I just
right.
you see a lot of companies, especially in these industries, get bought by private equity firms, which for good reasons can do a lot of like, sometimes they'll buy 3 companies and kinda stick them together, and it's way more valuable. You're like, "This is great." Like, I
Yeah.
would much rather have, like, these together.
Right.
But I think also, to your point, like, if you kinda lose the people who care, you lose the muscle, if you will, to really innovate, then you'll start to see those things. It starts to come out, right? Like you don't see it right away in the next month or two, but 2 years goes by, 3 years goes by, and you start to see the people who are continuing to innovate go up. Like honestly, I think as we work with a lot of large firms, especially, one of the key things that they're really trying to suss out is obviously what's our capability now, but also like how quickly are we innovating and what's the plan there, right? Like, are we planning to do that, or are we going to kind of get stale, right? And there's a lot of people I think on platforms today that aren't moving as quickly as the people would like, and to your point, like a lot of them are really hard to get off. So it's like they're
Yeah.
kind of sitting there with this trade off of like, do I spend all the time to get off this thing onto another one, or do I just deal with this for another year? And I'm okay with the fact that I don't have certain things.
Yeah, maybe slightly related. What do you think about the chat bots? Like, um, I heard recently like Chat GPT is going to go bye bye just because it's getting so far behind Google and Claude. um, I don't know what Grok's up to, but which of these monstrous companies is going to win the chat bot race?
That is a good question that if I knew the answer of, I would probably be more successful in my investing career.
Yeah,
I would say like obviously we work with 3 different LLMs like across 4 different kind of hosting models.
yeah,
We are seeing a few different things, right? Like we see certain ones are much better than OpenAI at extracting data, just straight out, right? They're just
yeah.
better at that. They're more reliable. They don't have these dead spots in the system. Um, we still find OpenAI really good at generating anything that needs to sound human-like in a
Hmm,
way. So
yeah,
anything that like, like an email reply, any of those types of things, like it just sounds a bit more human. I do think everyone kind of assumed that OpenAI was running away with it, if you will, and I don't think that's true, right? I think like
yeah.
Gemini's recent stuff is really, frankly, fairly impressive. Anthropic's just been continually kind of making progress, and then there's a lot of open source models too that are getting increasingly good. I'm just going to slide over, Joe. Sorry, I have the sun coming in right
No,
behind me.
no, no, yeah,
So
that's
there we
great.
go.
Um, Normally I do a demo, and for this case, I don't know that it really makes sense to do a demo. We have 17 minutes left. I feel like this is a far more interesting conversation than a demo would be.
Totally up to you. Happy to show a few things in a minute or two. Happy to like. Why don't we keep the conversation going, and then if at any point I'm happy to, if it's easier just to show something versus talk to it, to go do that.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on AI overall? Looks like we got another question. Like I was like super pro AI, and then like my wife was like super anti AI. She's like, "This is horrible," and then I was like backed off a little bit, and then like I'm like super anti AI right now. I just feel like it's. I think humans need to actively work on like developing their brains. Basically, like they need to write, they
Yeah,
need to create, they need to think like without outsourcing their thinking. Like we're going to end up
Yeah.
with a lot of like very dumb humans if they're all relying on AI to like tell them what to do.
Yeah, it like here's so my view, I'm obviously like generally pro AI given,
Right.
what I do and where I spend my time. That being said, I think it's an extremely powerful tool that is, like any of these things, right, can be like not only misused, but if not, and I think maybe the right way to put it is we have to be more thoughtful about the impact it's going to have, right? So, like we were
Right.
talking, I know it sounds like a small thing, but I think it's important in the industry of like, you know, hey, if we're doing a lot of work that associates used to do, like what does that mean, right? And like that means we need to be very thoughtful on like how are we growing associates, how are we growing new advisors, how does that work? I think there's a lot of great things to go do that, and then I think like the hardest thing right now I would say is I have kids and them in school is interesting because like I went through like an engineering background, so kind of math and sciences and engineering, and we learned all of the stuff kind of from first principles before you're allowed to use a calculator, right? Like you have to know how to
Right.
do the equations, you have to, and then eventually you start using a calculator because like I no longer need to like multiply these, like 6-digit numbers together
Right.
manually all the time.
Yeah.
But I think in an AI world, it's fairly similar, right? Like you can't outsource learning to AI. You have to learn those things and understand why and kind of think through them. And in parallel, you also have to learn how to use AI, right? Just like you have to learn, or like at least for me, I had to learn how to, use computers growing up.
Yeah.
And so I think it's both. And I think the notion that like, I think this is true for a few different technologies in the last 20 years, like social media being another one that, like has definitely some negative effects. But I think we need to
For
be very
sure.
thoughtful going in as to like, okay, what do we want out of this and what do we not want out of this? And really be thoughtful about like when can we use these things, when can we not? And it's interesting. I spend a lot of time with both my kids around like where they do and don't use AI. And at times I push them to use it. I'm like, you should use
Yeah.
AI. Like one of them's writing their resume right now. And I'm like, it's
Yeah.
pretty good helping you write a resume. But on the flip side, I'm like, do you know what's in their resume? Like, do you know why this matters? And here's how, like, I've hired a lot of people. I'm like, here's how people read resumes. Right. And like, I think
Right.
it's actually important to do both of those things. I don't think it's it's going to take over the world type situation. And honestly, I know there's a lot of people who look at like LLMs and they think they're like magical, and they are in a lot of ways, but they're not inherently super smart, right? Like they do very specific things well, and I think those
Right.
things have not been like computers have not been able to do those things in the past, and so it's really impressive. But like just because the thing can sound human when it's talking doesn't mean you're like 6 months away from like some hell situation where it takes over the world. Like it's not we're
Yeah.
not even really close to that yet.
I wasn't at the Advise AI conference, but apparently Michael Kitces in his keynote called it a word calculator.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's actually a good way. Like I also, a lot of the Microsoft exec, like a lot of us still talk, and they kind of view it as like the internet in a bottle, right? It's just like I can
yeah.
basically take it and ask it whatever, and it's just like pulling out strings of knowledge, and that's honestly kind of what it's doing, right? Like it is that, and whereas before you had to translate kind of between human, right? Like it could do numbers, but it couldn't really do human language, and now it's basically gets human language, so it's pretty
Yeah.
different. Yeah,
So I was asking AI about I was asking ChatGPT about myself, and then it like summarized what it knew about me. And then I was like, how should I grow my AdvisorTech book business?
yeah,
And it gave like 5 ideas. And I read through them and I was like, oh, this is super interesting. And then I was like, what if I actually asked like a human what I should do with my so like why don't I ask like Stephanie Bogan or Michael Kitces, or like why
yeah.
don't I ask a real human that has experience what I
Doing,
should do with
yeah.
this? And the reality is their advice is so much more useful than
Oh,
anything I
100%.
get
Yeah,
from
yeah,
ChatGPT.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so that's kind of why I'm overreacting on purpose in a way. Like I'm trying to get off ChatGPT and I'm trying to get back to
yeah,
Google searching. But even further than that, like when I have a question, find a real human to ask it to, as opposed to
yeah.
asking it to
Well,
AI.
like the interesting thing, like my guess is like ChatGPT was probably very helpful in like giving you maybe new ideas. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Like it's kind of
Right,
broad, right? By definition, it's broad.
right,
Whereas like I'm sure you're very focused on everything you've been building in the day to day, so it kind of pops you out of it in a good way. But, like Itzus can probably give you like some real world, like, hey, here are the 6 things, but this is the hard one, right? Like focus on that, or here are the 2 things that matter the most and everything else, right? And that like is going to be, infinitely more valuable than anything the chatbot will tell you, I think.
yeah. No, and honestly, like my best ideas have come from like just reading a fantastical amount of books and then just writing. I'm like writing more and more.
Yeah.
I mean, almost writing like 2 or 3 Substacks a day now. And that annoys some people and they unsubscribe. But like, I'm honestly just trying to develop my brain to have better ideas. And like, it is, I feel like it is. Like recently, I was like, I'm trying to help financial advisors in general, but then it's like, I like dialing in on CFPs because there's a
Yeah.
100,000 CFPs, and I just know that they're taking their craft a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
So like, okay, there's 100,000 CFPs. Like, if I could get 3,000 of them to join my community, and then it's like, but what can I help them do? And then I was
Yeah.
like, why don't I take my podcast and turn it into like a daily live show in a way? Like, just
Mhm.
have a conversation with a CFP every single day at 1 p.m. Central or something, and
Yeah.
talk through their tech stack, talk through their business
Yeah.
problems.
Their learnings, yeah, like, what are the limiters to them? Like, we started
Right,
talking to a lot of advisors, and it just, I think for us initially, it was all around, helping them save time and frankly get out of work they don't love to do.
right.
And now it's really like, what's the limiter on your business, right? And for us, like, a lot of them were, "Hey, it's hiring and getting really good talent." That's where, and those, like, I do think, like, it sounds funny, but doing like, repeating the same thing again and again, even in a small way, like, it's like compounded interest, right? It starts small, but then all of a sudden the knowledge that you're building up doing that is huge, right? It's really incredible. Yeah, and
You can almost start to like see it. So like there's certain things that I know are coming in the next couple weeks that will probably be really good for me or for my business. Um but like our brains are so focused on like what went well today, but it's almost like let me just do good work today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and like I know for a fact 2 or 3 weeks from now something good will happen that
yeah,
will
yeah,
come from that.
totally. And you have to kind of remind yourself, like some mornings when I'm sure you're not as motivated as other mornings, like
For
you're
sure.
like, part of it is just, it's like, I have a lot of friends who are kind of become athletes over time. And a lot of it is like, you just, the days that are hard, you just keep doing it because you know that as you build and you build and you build, like 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, right? It just gets better and better. And again, with kids, you see that all the time. Like one of the harder
Yeah.
things I think for them is like it's hard for them to imagine if I do something every day that 90 days, which seems like infinitely far away for them, is going to get better. But once you see that loop, it's super valuable.
Yeah.
Super valuable. Yeah. And I think like to your AI question on that, like writing for me, like I've seen this in my career and I've seen this definitely across some of the best companies that I've worked at. Like a lot of them force you to write, and writing is hard, as
Yeah.
as
Oh,
you know.
it's very hard in the beginning for
And
sure.
but it forces you to like to be, is that real, or like is that just easy to think that, or is this like,
Right.
can I really back this up, right? Can I
Yeah.
really think through this? And like I think it's fine to have AI help you with those things, right? Like it's
Sure.
very hard staring at a blank page to get going, but that's very different from like outsourcing it to it and just be like, yep, like I'll just put 5 bullet points in and have AI write up like a 2 pager for me because like that's gonna be pretty fluffy and not very, not very useful, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
think marketing is storytelling, and the more AI is doing the writing and the content generation, and now like even video generation, like I think the more it's going to be like seeking beacons back to like what's real human stories.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I almost feel like AI is the best thing that's happened to human creativity because it's forcing humans to be more human.
Yeah, and it also like one of the things we actually had a guy. Well, I won't say anything too much now. He's about to announce that he's joined us, who's just very good at like, hey, how do you get your career? Like how do you build your practice and kind of start to do these things, right? And I
Yeah,
think a lot of it is like, you know, like how do you make you? Like, like what are you going to be
yeah,
very good at? And like you and I could both be very good at advisors at some point, and we may do very different things, right? Like I may be more about whatever, like financially different options and different scenarios or different client bases. You may be very much into like let me help you emotionally get through these like life events that you're going through and making sure like there's almost like an infinite way a
sure,
set of ways to do these things. And I think it is forcing a lot of people to think like, um, what is the value I'm actually adding to clients and how do I want to
right,
grow my business, right? Because it's not filling out forms to open up an account at
yeah,
Fidelity or Schwab, right? It's not the ability to like put something into a spreadsheet necessarily. It's probably more the ability to take the situation that person is in and mix that with the knowledge, right? And I think that's the other thing that I see all the time is like advisors who can take almost like two skill sets, right? Like, like whatever, you're in the military and you're helping those people with their finances, like super
Right.
valuable, right? Because you
Yeah.
understand both worlds, right? You're a doctor and doing that. You're helping people through whatever with new kids or buying a house in a frankly very expensive housing market, whatever those things
Sure.
are. Like if you can take two of those things and merge it, that's just such a more unique and valuable set of skills in my view. And I think AI is forcing a lot of people in a good way to actually think through like what value am I providing?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a conversation about niching, and
Yeah.
once you find that the way that you're helping people or the problem that you're solving, you still have to find like how can you relate to those people. And I think the problem a lot of advisors run into is like, or not advisors, but like young ones, like right out of college or something, it's very hard for them to pick a niche because they've never done anything. Like
Yeah.
it's like I
No, and
don't
it
really
is
relate to
hard then, right?
anybody
It's
because
not like you're coming in with a ton of experience almost by
right,
definition, and, like, if it's in a textbook, it's probably good that you learned it, but it's also not unique because there's probably, like, thousands of other people who also, did the textbook and ran through those things, and that I do think that's one of the harder things right now is, like, where do you start? Because the world's changing quite quickly, and I think everyone is always looking for, like, what's the low risk, high like, if I just do ABC, I know I'll be successful, and, like, the reality is it's almost what you just said before, right? Like if you get up every morning, pick a problem and just keep working on it for a long time, like you will learn a
yeah.
lot and be successful. But man, that feels like a long, a long marathon some mornings for sure.
So if you could, it's funny. They asked Alex Hermosi this recently. Like, if you could boil business success down to one single thing, what would it be? Um, I don't know if you know his answer or not, but like, if for you, like, if you could boil business success down to one single thing, maybe
Yeah.
specifically for financial advisors.
I'm curious to know his answer. Like let me just think through this quickly. So ultimately for me, like whether it's financial advisors or not, it's delivering more value to that person than you're
Yeah,
taking at the end of the day. Like that's it. Right. And there's like you can think of that through, whatever business you want. Um, I think one of the best characteristics, if you will, or I don't know, characteristics is the right word, capabilities that I've noticed over time, uh, is the ability to communicate. Like I think anybody who can do that very well and cleanly with people tends to do very well. But I think just from overall business success, it's really like if you can understand what they need, and I would say like, and deliver more than you're taking from them,
yeah,
you'll do very well.
yeah.
What did he say?
So he said volume, meaning
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
practice. Like if you want to get really good at shooting a basketball, like shoot a basketball for 10 hours a day for 10 years.
Yeah,
Like get really
I
good.
100% agree with that. Like, if you wanna be the best at whatever you wanna do, I
Right.
think just reps, right? Just the more reps, the better, um, it's true.
It's
It's,
it's fascinating watching the Olympics because like you see someone that's like the best in the world at something that you're like, man, if I did it as much as they would, I would be so incredibly bored out of my mind. Like, but
yeah, and you
like,
realize a lot of it is, like, the focus, right? And it's the
right,
same with starting a company, like, frankly, it's like, which, like, most, advisors have done their own thing. It's like it's also being able to motivate yourself through the tough times, right? And get doing that so that like, when you're looking at that person, to your point, like whatever shot putting for the, 100,000th time and
right,
it's like the reality is they were able to push through some tough times and are the best in the world at it for now.
yeah,
I think part of it is also liking whatever it is or
like,
like being
sure,
motivated, whether that's through like or some other reason that you're getting motivated. But yeah,
yeah.
totally.
While we're almost to the end, I do want to bring it back around to Zocks. What anything exciting you're working on, or something that you're passionate about, or the future of Zocks as a company, or how
Yeah,
do you want
we're
to?
working on a lot right now. I think anyone who's heard me before, I'll sound like a broken record. The space is just moving a lot quicker than, frankly, like other software, faster than mobile move, faster than the cloud moved.
Hmm,
And so I think people are going to be surprised at how quickly um, their business is changing with AI. And with so like today, as I mentioned, like we started opening accounts. We're starting to fill out forms for like money movement and stuff like that. You're going to see that come out very quickly with most of the custodians and a lot of the broker dealers. then the other big thing that we're starting to do, which is super cool, is because we have all of this data now on clients, right? On the clients that an advisor has, um, they can not just like add, like I think we see these ask anythings and we have those capabilities, but really the ability to kind of query across it and say, tell
Yeah.
me everything who's in this state, in this state, in this state, and that is going to be out very shortly, and that's actually a precursor to like kind of what are the next best like you know, like what should I do, right? So you're like, hey, you have a client with this and this, you know, you probably should be looking at this. And I think the other huge one that like just that it's not unique to advisors, but you know, like if you're meeting your client every 6 months, you're probably really good at those two meetings. Everything in the middle is like a little, you know, you're busy. And so even the things of like, hey, you talked with Joe 2 months ago. He said he's going on a vacation to Africa for the first time. Like, why don't you shoot him a quick note? Or, you know, or you said you'd give
Yeah.
him these, like any of those types of things. And
Right.
so I think what we're seeing already is some of our most aggressive users are just able to scale their businesses way beyond what they could before. And sometimes it's just
Yeah.
more clients, but it's also like you can actually keep people warmer and doing those things. And because everybody wants, not every, like everyone wants to do that, right? They want to be helpful to their friends. They want to be like kind of a support mechanism and frankly connected to their clients. And so you're just going to see a lot of that. And it's going to frankly come very quickly, very,
Yeah.
very quickly. Like Jan, Feb, March, you'll see a lot of pieces coming out there. Um, yeah, it's gonna. We're super excited. It's super cool. We have some larger firms as well using us, you know, with data warehousing to start to really do bigger pieces. But like the key thing for us is getting that down directly to the advisor themselves, so they can just see it without having to like do a ton of work or have to know anything about database schemas or any of that stuff.
Yeah. So like business intelligence, client intelligence. And then I'd even say like using AI to help humans be more human, meaning
Yeah.
maybe the AI reminds you that you should reach out, but then like when you actually reach out, like you should do it in your own voice or your own, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's
Like,
it, that's it, and I think what we see is, like, if you can nudge someone to do that, they'll do it, right? Like,
right.
it's just if they have to remember themselves, then write everything from scratch, it gets a little trickier. If you can kinda nudge them and give them a clue, it's really great.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. Well, it's
Awesome.
been great. Really fun conversation. Thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate it, Joe. Have a great
All
rest
right.
of your day too. Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you later. Bye bye.